Edmonton is located within 3T6 territory and within the Métis Homelands and Métis Nation of Alberta Region 4. We at the International and Heritage Languages Association acknowledge this land as the traditional territories of many First Nations, such as the Nehiyaw Cree, Danesulin Dene, Nakota Sioux Stony, Anishinaabe Saltu, and Niitsitapi Blackfoot. Welcome, everybody. This is Christina Pickles' Get Outside and Play session. It is a two-part session. Hopefully the next session we are going to try to do it outdoors, but the original dates for this is today and April 11th from 6:30 to 8:30. We would like to welcome Christina Pickles to the two-part PD series. Christina Pickles has been connecting people of all ages with the natural world for 20 years in the Badlands, forests, streams, and streets. 7 years ago, she pivoted her work to put play at the center of all she does, as she believes it is the best way children and adults connect with nature, their communities, their bodies, and each other. She lives along the banks of the Bow River with her husband and 7-year-old daughter. Is that still current?
Oh,
She's
yeah.
7?
Yeah, she'll be next month, so I have to change.
Oh, okay, so we gotta change that. We will post the link to her website, getoutsidandplay.ca/about, if you need to know more about Christina. Today's session, our first part session, we're going to learn students learn best through direct hands-on experiences. And the best place to do this is outside. In the first session, we will explore ideas on how to take your language learning outside through simple ideas that can be done in any environment, from a forest to the streets. You will then have an opportunity to try some of the ideas before our second session, where we will see how you did and address any questions or challenges you may have. You will come away from these sessions with new ideas to bring language to life for your students. And in addition, in 2018, she was honored to receive a national award from the Canadian Network for Environmental Education and Communication. This award recognized the Get Outside and Play program and the work she has done advocating for outdoor play and nature connection in the early years. This was on CBC.
This is probably good. You're good.
Yeah. Welcome, Christina Pickles. Can't wait to go play outside.
Thanks, Grace. Thank you so much. That was an intense introduction.
There's more.
Yeah, I know there's. So I got connected with your group through Antonella. She participated in, how many sessions did we have? 4 or 5 sessions with teachers across Alberta. Last year focused on learning outdoors. And so she thought that your group would be interested in learning some of these ideas on how to get students outside and how we might incorporate your work outdoors. Because I know that, like Grace said, I believe learning happens best outside. And I think it would be really interesting and intriguing to explore language outside. What does that look like? And so that's it's an interesting idea. So I'm not a language expert. Hold on, my puppy is barking. I need to go. So you're the language experts. I have experience working outdoors with children, students of all ages, everything from 3-year-olds all the way up to high school. And so that's what I'm bringing to this. So I'm hoping to give you a pile of different ideas. It's really up to you to choose what you think would work best for your students, but also for yourself. We're not expecting you to take it all outside for the next 3 weeks. The goal is for you to find one way that you could take your learning outside during the next 3 or 4 weeks. So we're not asking for the moon. Just choose something that can kind of start the ball rolling and thinking about how you might take learning outside. We have a smaller group today, so we have lots of opportunity for, if you want to ask questions, if you want to have more of a conversation, that's really great as well. That's one of the benefits of having a bit of a smaller group, is we can do that. And so you can either use the chat liberally as well if you have a question, or again, because we're a smaller group, you can use your mic and you can use your voice and we could hear you as well. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. Let's start here. All right. Just taking a moment. All right. So Grace gave an excellent introduction. I have been, my first job out in university was working as an interpreter at a wetland. And that set me on this path of environmental education. And since then, I've worked for university, for the province, for nonprofits that support and encourage environmental education. And like Grace said, about 7 years ago, I learned more about play in the early years. And so now I incorporate that aspect of play into the work I do as well. So this balance that I'm kind of putting you all in sort of a category of teachers, because that's what you are. You often have goals, right? You have goals and outcomes that you need and that you want the children to accomplish. And so combining the outdoors and play and those goals is kind of the focus of this work. So right now I run workshops for early childhood educators, schools, and communities, really focused on that idea of unstructured play, but also with teachers on how to incorporate more outdoor learning. How do we get that curriculum outdoors as well? I also work outdoors with the program 2.5 days a week now. And so I'm working directly with children we're outside with them for 3 hours every day, each session. And so I'm learning a ton from the children. It's really quite amazing what they get up to outside. Okay, so actually we're gonna go, I wanna hear a little bit about you. So I don't know, I mean, I know what Antonella has told me, but I don't know much about how your programs work. So I'm curious about what are the, and maybe share this in the chat, what are the goals of your program? Like when students come to you, what do you want them to leave with? What's your goal when you're working with the students in your language program? So you can either take your mic off and share, or write in the chat what that is. I'm curious on what your goals are when you're working with children, with students.
Can I share?
Yes, go ahead.
So as far as Telugu School of Edmonton is concerned, we are not setting very high goals. We don't expect kids to be very, very perfect in the language, in the Telugu language, what they learn, because we are teaching only 2 hours a week, 2 hours in a week. And of course, it depends on the parents who are teaching them, but most of them are not,
Mhm.
fortunately. So with this just 2 hours of goal of teaching Telugu, what we are expecting them is to speak, write, and listen and understand the language, and then they should be able to communicate um, well in Telugu when they speak to some relations in India. That's
Mm.
all. Other
Okay.
than, I mean, yeah, a little extra thing is they should be able to read the Telugu newspapers and then
Mhm.
understand the content. This is what is our goal. I mean,
Okay.
not very very advanced level, but this is the basic
Mhm.
goals we are setting up for our students.
Thank you. That's really useful. Anyone else have slightly different goals for the students that they're working with?
Randy, you say yeah. Absolutely.
Anyone else would like to share?
I'll share since nobody's sharing. Maybe it'll give everybody time. So at our school, we run every day, Monday through Friday, 3 hours a session, morning and afternoon. Our goal is similar to Vivek's. We can't depend on the parents maintaining or sustaining the heritage language that we're teaching. However, our goal is to have them have packaged sentences that are useful every day. I need to go to the bathroom. Can I please have this? Some fruits and vegetables that they eat every day. And also, and first and foremost, is to be comfortable hearing the language, even if they only understand one word out of like 20.
Yeah.
So that goal, and also that they enjoy learning language, another language in general. And speaking to the fact that we've been incorporating outdoor learning, that they see language outdoors and that they feel comfortable being outdoors and exploring it in all its weather and temperature and mess. And so that's our goal at our school.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything different or anything to add?
In our school, actually. So last year, because we wanted to incorporate outdoor learning, and we had a topic that involved them planting. So we ended up, getting sponsors for seeds and pots and soil, and we got them to go outside. We even had a person come in to do composting with worms. So we did that. We did that. That's what it is. So the little kids literally just played with the soil, and the older kids, the high school kids, did the planting, harvesting, the enjoyment of it. Yeah, so it was like our first time to actually incorporate planting and being outdoors.
Yeah.
And then experiencing the dread of winter in May, when they just took outside their little seedlings, but they learned, they learned. Some of them did bring it in, but no, it was good. Like, and it also involved parents. So, because that was a goal, actually, to get the parents involved. And then we had language, like they had stickers to put on what a pot is in our language, the soil. And so it was much more meaningful, I think, for us.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we do, starting in April, actually May, we usually go outdoors. So between May and then we meet up in July and August.
Yeah.
We do a lot of picnics and things like that by the river valley.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I love that making, when you make that language meaningful, that it sticks better. It sticks when it's actually, when they can see it in their world in a different way. So thank you for sharing that. It helps me kind of understand a bit more what your goals are. I mean, yeah, it's hard to get, you can't get anyone fluent in 2 hours a week, but making them comfortable and supporting them in their language, I think that's great. So I'm hoping that you can come away with some ideas. Again, some of my ideas might be like, she crazy, like what is she talking about? That's not possible. I'm not going to do that. And other ones you might be, okay, I can try that. So I want you to keep an open mind. And so my job is to throw a bunch of ideas at you, and we will have an opportunity to talk in maybe some smaller groups about what might be possible for you and your students. But let's start with, I start most of my sessions with kind of why do we need to go outside? And I think many of us might know this already. I just wanted to share my sort of view on it and how I sort of categorized why I'm so interested and passionate about this. And so I've divided it into 4 different categories on why we need to go outside as adults, but also to take children outside. The first one, I come from a background of ecology and geography and environmental education. And so this one is really close to my heart, is that experiencing the environment with all the senses builds a foundation of nature connection that develops lifelong environmental stewardship. So yes, we can bring nature indoors, but that's not good enough. We need to get outside. We need to touch the trees. We need to climb the trees. We need to roll down the hills. We need to get muddy. We need to get cold. We need to get wet. We need to maybe pick some flowers to really develop that connection with the natural world. And one of the pieces that the research has shown is that children also need an adult in their life that models that for them. And we know that with children, it's with language as well, to have that model that shows them how it's done. And it's the same with nature. So to have an adult in their life, whether it's a parent or a teacher or an auntie or a guide leader that takes them outside on adventures and is curious with them. This adult doesn't need to know all the answers. This adult needs to be curious and not freak out when the worm is brought to them or support them in discovery of spiders. For me, I can't stand snakes. I really appreciate their role in the ecosystem, but I've never had a child bring me a snake, thank goodness. But I would have to support a child in discovering more about this snake, even though it doesn't make me feel really great. So children need an adult to model that, and they need an opportunity to directly experience nature. And I think sometimes we tell children not to touch things, not to climb the trees, don't, and that creates a distance between them and the natural world. It's okay to they need that direct connection because that's how they learn and that's how they develop a relationship with nature. So what can this look like? This looks like, having a relationship. It looks like sensory activities. It can look like quiet time in nature, reflection and journaling. It can look like play, directly playing in nature. It can look like there's a concept called animal allies where children become the birds. They put on cardboard wings and they fly around, they build nests. And that's the way that they develop a connection with plants and animals as well. The second one is about exploring the neighborhood. And we'll talk a little, I'll share some resources around this as well, because I think no matter your context, whether you have a park nearby or like Antonella says, you might be in a strip mall renting a space, this is something that you can probably do, is to get outside and discover the neighborhood. Children need to develop a sense of place and a sense of belonging. And this contributes to them feeling like they're part of a safe and welcoming community. So getting out in the community and walking, you might find the neighbor down the street who gardens in their front yard, or the community garden around the corner, or there might be a secret little forested grove that you can go visit. So getting out and walking the community is really important for children and for adults. You learn how to cross roads. You learn also really great skills and that sense of community when you get out the door. So again, what could this look like? It could look like community walks, maps, we'll talk about that. Special places, finding those secret corners nearby that might have a hidden fort or something, and meeting the people, which is really key to key piece as well. The third one is that children are just more active outside. And I think you probably know that. If you've worked with children, you know that when you take them outside, they run more. I remember taking a group of kindergarten children outside once, and they had the field in front of them and they just started to run. And they just wouldn't stop. They just felt so free. And so children just move their bodies in different ways outside. And this actually supports learning. So when we're sitting still for too long, it's bad news. So when we move our bodies, we also move our minds. And so children can be big outside. They can be loud outside, things that we don't allow indoors. We say things like inside voices or quiet feet or whatever those things are. That is just not natural for children. And so going outside allows children, some children who have trouble being indoors are completely different children outside, because again, they can kind of be who they really are. And it also helps develop a strong foundation of physical literacy, which is something that our children and probably us as adults are struggling with as well. It really helps build strong bodies, which supports our minds as well. So what could this look like? This can look like challenges and obstacle courses. We'll talk a little bit about loose parts. It can look like different types of physical games outside. And again, it's kind of your job to connect this to language, but I see so many opportunities to connect different big, wide games outside to different concepts that you might be trying to teach. And finally, the outdoors is a really great place to spark curiosity and learning. Grace shared about gardening outside, and there's so many natural ways to spark conversation outside that you might have to manufacture inside the four walls, but when you go out, these kind of things happen naturally. Vocabulary is often stronger with children who are outside more because there's more sort of stimulus, there's more things to talk about. I had a friend who, this is anecdotal evidence, but she worked with a program to move, it was actually a preschool. They moved their entire preschool program outside. And one of the side effects is that they had less visits from the speech therapists. The children's speech improved when they went outdoors. They don't know why, but their vocabulary improved, their speech improved when they moved their program outside. So it's a great place for learning. It's a great place to spark curiosity and wonder and to explore. And so what can this actually look like? It can look like some more structured activities. It can look like bringing books and stories outside. It can look like observation, experimentation, and building outside. These are just a few ideas. All right, so I'm going to turn it to you for a moment. I'm going to get you to use the chat in a second here. When you think of getting children outside, what is your why? Why do you think it's important? Is it because it's about nature connection that's really important to you? Is it about community and sense of belonging? Is it about physical health and well-being? Or is it about curiosity and wonder? If you were to choose one, you can only choose one, which one would it be? Which one sort of rises to the top for you when it comes to why you feel we need to get children outside? So you can share that in the chat and we'll see where everyone's at with that. And yes, they're all connected, but you must choose one. Oh, I love that idea. It gives students a bigger canvas to work with than being indoors. We'll talk about canvases because I think that's a really great way to use the outdoors as a canvas. Curiosity and wonder. Yeah, mental health and happiness. There's a huge connection between our mental health and being outside. They did a study where they had people in a hospital. One group could see the outdoors. They weren't even outdoors. They could see trees. They could see a natural environment outside their window. The other group just saw a parking lot. And so the group of people who could even just see trees healed faster and with less complications than the other group. So it just really speaks to our deep connection mentally and physically to the natural world. So even just being able to see trees out your window is important. I mean, it's better to go touch them, but go out there. Bring some joy into learning, making real world connections and helping students realize why we are learning and the significance of it. Yeah, that's a really great point, Sylvia. And I'm hoping that's sort of, the more I start to think about the work that you all do and how that connects to the outdoors, that real world connection is really what I see as the strongest piece. I see changes through the seasons. Thanks for sharing all those ideas. Yeah, and the reason why I like to talk about the why is because it's not always easy to get students outside. It's hard some days because maybe it's cold, maybe your back hurts, or you forgot your warm boots, or the children forgot their warm boots, or whatever that is. It's not always easy to go outside. Sometimes there's things that you feel you need to get done inside before you can go outside. So remembering your why this is important to you as a teacher really helps to kind of motivate you when it is more challenging. And it may help motivate you to think about how you can push something outside that maybe you wouldn't normally think of doing. So remember that why, remember your why is one way to help keep the motivation going when things aren't easy. Or when you maybe don't have the most ideal environment for this type of learning. So I'm just going to throw just a little bit of the research. There is this really great, what I'll do at the end is I'll send all these slides out, Marina, and maybe you can share them with everyone. So if you do want to look at some of this stuff in more depth, Frontiers in Psychology, I believe, put together one of those meta-analyses where they look at all the studies, and what they did is they pulled out, they looked at learning outdoors specifically, different types of learning and how that supported academic achievement. And so students who learned outside had an increased retention of subject matter, higher test scores, better grades, better leadership skills, better communication skills, more resilience. And so these are the themes that they pulled out of all these research papers. Quite a variety of contexts and how they supported children in learning. So, I mean, the research is really pointing to, it's a great idea. It supports children and students of all ages in many, many different ways. And this is really simplifying it. But if we look at just some general literacy skills, children need strong bodies, right? And when we develop our gross motor skills, we develop our core, and this in turn supports our fine motor skills. And this in turn supports our writing skills. So when children are learning to write too early, when they haven't developed these other skills, it's harder. And so this is just, again, oversimplified idea of that we need to develop our physical literacy skills to really work on our writing skills. And when we look at the idea of reading, and this is connected, I was connecting this more to the play aspect, is when children can get into play, it really ignites their imagination. And that results in a whole bunch of language that happens, telling stories, communicating together. And I mean, this is early language skills, but that supports reading skills. when children have that language that supports how they read. So this is really focused on play as opposed to maybe some more structured activities. But really it speaks to some of the skills that we can develop outdoors that support these more academic skills of reading and writing. Okay, before we move on to the reality check, anyone have any questions or comments that they'd like to share? All right. So yes, getting outside is great. It's great for children. It's there's lots of learning that goes on. But we also have to deal with reality. And there's lots of realities that I guess the other word for reality is some barriers and challenges that you face in getting outside in your programs. So I'd love to hear some of what those barriers and challenges might be. So again, we have a small enough group that if you would like to take your mic off and share some of those, maybe just take a moment and think about some of those barriers that you might have. And then you can either share them in the chat or turn your mic off and talk a little bit about what your barriers might be. And I'm pretty sure that other people here will have the same or similar barriers to you. So take a moment and think about it and feel free to tell us. I'd love to hear what some of them are.
Well, the biggest barriers here in Canada is really the -40-degree weather that we have quite more, like, I mean, I think it's much more now than before. And we were speaking about it before the session, actually, of getting out at -40 and the kids are not dressed well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's a barrier. And we do have kids who don't come from families who can dress them well, like with the gear, the proper gear.
Yeah.
Right? Because the proper gear isn't just your snow pants and your jacket and your gloves and a good boot. You sometimes at -40-degree weather, you would need your goggles, no shoes, you would need an extra earmuff, all that heating padding that you can, so things like that. That's the biggest barrier, I think. And also dressing well for the weather, even at -20 or even -15.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, we seem to think it's always cold, but it is not always cold.
It was this year.
Yeah, we had a different experience in Calgary. It was actually warmer than we thought. But yeah, it's right. Weather is one. And I mean, at -40, you probably aren't taking the kids out anyway, but even -20, I know the schools here have indoor recess at -20. And so acknowledging that, and I think you don't have the students every day. You have them maybe one day a week. So maybe you save going outdoors for when it is a little warmer, and that's okay. You can't go out all the time. Arushi, you mentioned parents also may not understand learning outside, which might stop kids from coming to learn. And that's really something that schools struggle with, childcare, everyone struggles with this idea that learning happens in the four walls of a classroom. And that comes from our school system and school systems around the world. We go to a room inside to learn. And that's just been what we all grew up with around the world, is going to school in a room. And so if parents really want that academic success and academic piece for their children, you're right, that if they think we're going outside, they might not come that day. And I've heard that from other people too, that said, well, even early years family programming, we're going outside, we won't go that day because of various reasons. So it's a communication piece with the parents on what we did outside. And I think you might have to make more of an effort when you do go outside to make those connections for parents, and sending home a little note that said, we did this, and this is this is what the children learned, like really showing what that learning looked like. It's a really important communication piece with parents, and it does take time. It's not always an easy one, but that's one that many people come across. Any other barriers? So we had whether we have communicating with parents on what this means. Any other barriers?
Yeah, main barrier is Omicron. When it is going to end, we don't know. Deltas over deltas are coming on Omicron.
Yes.
We really miss, like, we thought of having this outdoor session last summer, like at least for graduation of some of the students who were graduating from our school, but it never happened. We
Yeah.
sent out an email, but most of the parents didn't like to meet. So, I mean, it's understandable. They have their own fears and
Yeah.
apprehensions, but yeah, really, I'm looking for a day, like a normal day. I don't know when it is going to happen, but yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the, I don't want to say benefits of COVID, but it made people think about the outdoors in a different way. It made it a safe place for many people to still have classes and to still learn together. So I'm hoping that now that everyone may have some capacity to learn, especially teachers, we might start to think about, okay, so how do I develop my skills as an educator to take my learning outside with the students when this might happen again? So Sylvia, you mentioned a safe place to explore in the outdoors, because yeah, we're not all within a walking distance of a park. And so I'm hoping to give you some ideas that could be done in very limited spaces. And you could do things in a sort of manicured park. You can do things in even a little garden box, if you have access to that, or a small grove of trees. But even walking around the community as well. So there are ways. You don't need a beautiful large forest. You don't need to be within walking distance of the river valley. There are some ways that you can still take that learning outside. But yeah, safe space, and how you need to make sure that the space is safe, and you need to check it and all that sort of thing too. So that is part of learning outdoors, is being aware of that sort of risk benefit assessment that you're doing of the spaces that you're in. Any other
comment? Yes, on what you said about the pandemic.
Yeah.
In regards to learning outdoors. So we, for our school, this is exactly what we've done. So in the previous year when it started, we thought, well, I mean, obviously our program director thought this would be, a very good idea to take the kids outside, being safe and learning at the same time. And so this year we continue doing that, but thinking, okay, we introduced this into our program as, and we called it outdoor school.
Yeah.
Our outdoor school. So we educated the parents as well. So everybody knows what we're doing and how the kids need to be dressed.
Yeah.
And it works perfectly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's a growing movement in Canada. It's been other places in the world for a while around that forest school idea, that outdoor learning idea. So if you have a population of families who are really already interested in that, and then you combine that language piece in there, I think you would have a winning program. But I think it would really depend on the families that you're working with. So it sounded like it was a win for you, Olga, that families were really bought into the getting outdoors and the outdoor school. And so Sylvia says, I'm wondering, in what ways can you bring the outdoors into your classroom, especially in the coldest winter months? Yeah, that's a good question, because I mean, I know people who bring in buckets of snow to play with inside, but even just growing plants under lights. I don't know how realistic it is to bring in, have like some people, have the hamsters and that type of, they're not nature, but they're an animal. So there are ways, or bringing in natural loose parts. So things like cones and twigs and things into the classroom is another way to consider bringing the outdoors in. Science experiments is a good suggestion. Yeah. All right, so yeah, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time acknowledging that there are some structural barriers, whether it's the view of families and getting outside, or the space you have access to. There are some of those barriers. Being dressed for the weather. I know many places have lots of extra clothes if children aren't dressed to go outside. With Marina, I'll share it with you, and then you can share it with the group too. I have a resource called Dressing for the Weather that has a thermometer on one side and how to dress at different temperatures. And so it's a very visual way to start communicating on how we dress to go outside. So yeah, there's ways to overcome these barriers, but I wanted to acknowledge that they exist. It's not all forests and trees and rainbows and unicorns. So the way I think about getting outdoors is I think about sort of two different ways, two different sort of activities or experiences that children can have outside. On one end is that idea of sort of unstructured, which I don't actually like the word, but it gets to the point that it's more child-led, it's student-led, unstructured play, where children can sort of explore on their own outside, supervised. And then on the other hand is that structured, where we do adult-led activities. So we initiate the activity and the students do it. And so it's a spectrum, but these are the two lenses that I put on sort of what I'm going to share next, is that idea of unstructured play. What can that look like outside? How can we support children in exploring their world outside? And then what are some more structured activities where we can introduce the language aspect that all of you focus on. So I'll give you some ideas on both of them, because they both have really great value in getting children outside and different skills they can learn through these two different lenses. And again, parents send their children to you probably more for the structured side. But again, I think there's a role for both in supporting learning outdoors. So some of you may be familiar with this idea already. This is more on the sort of unstructured side, that idea of providing students with what we call loose parts. So these are materials that are open-ended to explore outdoors. Loose parts are used indoors quite often as well, but quite often children build with them and they use for imaginary play, all sorts of different things that we can use loose parts for. So I'm just going to give you some ideas on materials. So if you just have like a blank schoolyard with no trees or whatever, sometimes bringing some materials outside can really spark children's imagination and curiosity when they're outside. Because you might not have the nature at hand, so you need to bring materials to support that. And these can be materials that are natural, or they can be sort of human materials. So one of the items that I've seen anywhere from 2-year-olds to 12-year-olds engage with is kitchen materials outside. So things like real pots and pans, and that idea of the mud kitchen. But these sorts of things get children talking to each other and playing and mixing things together. It works in the winter, it works in all seasons. You don't need to have mud. I almost always have these materials for children to engage in when they go outside, because it's something about it. Most children have watched their parents cook. It also sometimes incorporates cultural elements, because we all cook slightly different things. So it's one way to add those conversations in there as well. Students love buckets and baskets. They love filling them with things, carrying them around, collecting things. I had one guy who's a bit younger, about 4 years old, put a basket on his back and he was a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle for 3 hours. So things like they're very simple. Buckets and baskets, there's lots that children can do with them. Filling them with snow and building towers, using them as sort of sand pails and things like that. So buckets and baskets are great to bring outside. Students love building shelters outside. So tarps and sheets allow that to happen. There's also an opportunity for art outside using a big sheet between two trees or on a fence. You can paint on it with regular paint. You can paint with mud. It's that idea of a larger canvas outside. Wheels and sleds and tires is a great way that children can, again, build with them. They move things around in the play space. They move each other around. Again, they seem like they're open-ended materials in which they can do anything with. And parents may wonder why you have these weird things in your schoolyard, but students love them. Simply bringing boards. So boards from a fence project or a construction project for balancing, for building, making teeter-totters, these things. Again, they're open-ended materials that children just run with and build all sorts of things with. Okay, so those are some ideas of loose parts. And again, it's more on that unstructured side of play, of being outside. And sometimes loose parts are a great way for students to build relationships with each other, because again, they have that space and time and those materials to explore together, and they do all sorts of interesting things. An interesting book, again, it's in English, but there's not many words in it, so you could easily probably translate it into any language you want. But there's two of these books. One's called Not a Box and one's called Not a Stick. And it just, I don't know if you can see myself. But all it starts with is, oh, so why are you sitting in a box? And the rabbit says, it's not a box. It's a race car. So the book is just repeated like that over and over again. It's pretty simple, but again, it sparks imagination. It's pretty simple language. You could, there's lots of extensions that you could do with this type of book. The next one is called Not a Stick. So same idea. It's basically sparking imagination around what can we do with a stick? A stick is not a stick, it's a wand. It's a fire hose. It's a sword. All those different things you can do with a stick. So it's bringing in different types of language, but also loose parts and sort of sparking that imagination piece. So those are a couple of ideas that are maybe add a bit more structure to that loose parts piece. And then of course there's natural materials to build with outside and explore. So ice chunks and snow, and this time of year, snow is getting sticky, so it's really great to build with. Bringing out, we'll talk a little bit about that later, but paints to paint on top of the snow, or spray bottles with colored water in there. So you're getting in colors and art and different things. So lots of different ways. Right, so those are a couple of unstructured type activities. I'm going to move more into some of the structured ideas that I think apply well to the work that you do. And I'm going to share, again, I can't go too deeply into all the resources, but I'll share some really great sort of books and resources that are out there. Anyone, first of all, have any questions about sort of that unstructured time outside? It's really hard to incorporate sometimes because we feel we need to like get the curriculum in and get those lessons in. But I think there's great value in students having an opportunity to engage with each other in a more unstructured way. All right, so when we think about writing outside, if we need to do that, this is a really great book called Dirty Teaching. Juliet Robertson's from Scotland. Her book is written in a it's really easy. It's like she'll have a little title and a couple of bullet points. So it's not a huge lesson plan. She just offers some really, really great ideas. So she has a little section when she talks about writing kits. If you need to write outside, it's not always easy. If it's not snowing, it might be raining, or it might just be damp outside, and paper and pens aren't awesome for that type of writing. And so there's many different ways to do it. So having smaller pocket-sized notepads and pencils outside. She talks about she rolls up strips of paper just to make it more interesting. Small magnifying glasses. Scratch sticks that you could write on in dirt. Same with popsicle sticks, making shapes and words in dirt and mud and snow. This is a cool one that I've never done before. Old CDs or mirrors with dry erase pens. So again, experiencing writing in a very different way. What was the I forget how she was using double-sided sticky tape. Anyway, could be cool. And small clipboards or a transparent tarp that you can write on. So there's different ways to write outside. We always have some people, one of the classes I was working with, the teachers like, we have a big push on literacy and writing in our school, but outside the kids' hands get cold. And so the program that I work with, we call them snack mitts, those dollar store magic mitts, they're called, those really stretchy, they're like $1 each. But if children if you want them to write outside, to take off their big mitts and put on just those little mitts allows them to do some writing or have a snack outside without their hands getting too cold. So that's one way to encourage and support writing in sort of all different weather. So those are some different ideas for supporting writing outside. And when we talk about learning words and letters, we can write them down, but when we actually have to think about and build them in a different way, it just accesses a different part of the brain and a different way of learning. So going outside and gathering materials like sticks or leaves or cones and building words and letters with them. It would be that's a different way to use the outdoors. We want children to write and draw. Why not use what we run into outside to do that? So there's a friend of mine was doing a unit on the solar system, and it had just snowed, so there was a bunch of fresh snow. So the students drew the solar system outside in the snow. So when it snows, it's an amazing canvas to do writing and drawing and art outside. Writing in mud, writing in the snow, writing in sand. Again, using a big sheet and being able to paint with mud and have a different type of art experience outside. This picture in the lower left, this group, they made canvases out of snow. So they took a box and they patted the snow down and they spritzed it with water, left it overnight, and then they, in the morning, propped up the boxes and took the chunks of snow out and put them around the schoolyard. And then there are these canvases that then the students used spray bottles, or you could even take paint outside and did sort of an art experience outside. So think of being outside as sort of a different way to embody words and language and writing. What are the surfaces that you could use? When I was searching for words for, what did I type in? I think I put mud writing outside, and there was lots of pictures that popped up, like the wash me on cars that show up when they're dirty. Anyway, so think about how you can use the outdoors as a canvas or a blank sheet for writing on. This was a neat idea from David Sobel, is an amazing outdoor thinker and educator. And his idea was alphabetizing the nearby. So instead of having these books about letters and numbers from other places. Why don't we go and find them in our own community? So how can we go out on a walk and find all the letters that we need to find and write about them? So really keeping it local. So connecting that language to our direct experiences that are close by to us. To turn my light on, it was getting a little dark. So that was a really neat idea, putting together your own local alphabet book. This was another way of looking at letters outside, or this was, I think last year, we had a big dump of snow. And this is my daughter when she was 7, I think, 6, anyway. But using our whole body to do art or letters outside in the snow. And this, I didn't prompt her with this, she just did it. But crawling around and making shapes in the snow. So a very embodied experience of making letters. She was doing art. This is a heart on the right-hand side. So again, students can express language in so many different ways and express themselves in many different ways. And when we have this deep, deep snow, how can we use it as a different type of canvas? The idea of using journals outside, there's lots of research and lots of ideas on how to do a nature journal. So again, nature can prompt many different things, what you're seeing and feeling and smelling and hearing, and then learning to write about it or draw about it outdoors is a really powerful experience and very useful, because you can look back at it over the seasons and see what happened. So nature journaling is a great idea to do outside. It's not always, I mean, not all the students will sit and write quietly in their journal, but giving them different ideas. So there's some really great ideas for prompts outside. So things like looking for different colors or doing color smears, where you find a leaf or a piece of grass and you take your nail and you smear it on the color onto your page. And that could be a way of recording what's going on around you. So nature journaling is a great opportunity for language and literacy outside. And again, to make our language and literacy connected to the world around us, there's lots of really great guide books. But again, they're all in English. What's the opportunity to spend some time outside, find something that interests you, whether it's a cone or a rock or a feather. You draw it and label it, and you conduct some research to identify it and understand that. And then maybe the class puts together a guidebook on what they found. And then there's really great examples to share with students as well. These ones, they're just a laminated sheet. They're quite awesome. They're called the Pocket Naturalist Guides. And so they have them for different regions, this one's for birds, this one's trees and wildflowers. So it's pretty simple, but it's a neat way for, again, students to learn about the world around them, but also consider what to create their own that might, again, connect to their language and also connect to the things that they find interesting that they might find outside. Has anyone ever done story rocks before? Some people have, some people haven't. So story rocks, it's a way of building a story. So you can do it in several different ways. Maybe they're rocks that you collect and you put the pictures on them, and you kind of put the rocks in a big bag and you pass the bag around, and each student takes a rock out and you verbally add to the story. So you're kind of building a story as you go. Someone I know works in a garden with students, and she has the rocks out on the picnic table of things they have in their garden or experiences they've had in the garden. And she'll notice that a group of children will gather around them and kind of build their own story. It can also be a way to, if you've told a story from a book, then then the students can sort of represent the story on the rocks and sort of retell the story that way. So there's lots of different ways. So maybe you go out and gather the rocks and then you paint them or draw on them with Sharpies or whatever that is. And then you have these really great sort of learning tools. They're kind of, I don't know, cooler flashcards. And maybe you write the word on the back, whatever that is. But sort of, it's a more sort of hands-on way to build a story. All right, anyone have any questions or experiences they may have had with any of those types of activities or new ones? I'm throwing a lot of ideas at you. All right, I'll keep going. So Olga, what was the idea that you liked? I missed your comment there. Well, one of the ideas. All right, so the next, I'm going to talk a little bit about, again, more ideas. But David Sobel, I mentioned him, the alphabet from what you see outside, yeah. I mentioned David Sobel earlier with the alphabetizing localizing the alphabet, but he also wrote this really great book. What he did is he watched children play outside and just sort of unstructured play. And as he watched, he came up with 7 different ways that children were playing outside. And his idea was that, well, if we as teachers have to connect to the curriculum and connect to our outcomes, how can we do it in a way that children already play outside? And that makes the experience more meaningful and more interesting to the students. So he took how they played unstructured outside and worked to incorporate that into his more structured lesson plans. And I'm not going to go over all 7. I just wanted to touch on some of them that I think have some great potential for the work that you do. So that idea of adventure, children love adventures. When we say we're going on a walk, that's pretty boring. If we're going on a hike, that's a lot of work and also boring. But if we say we're going on an adventure, it means that there's lots of potential for who knows what. There's perhaps some unknowns in there that might make it a bit more interesting. So sometimes it's the language we use, and sometimes it's the approach we take. If we're just marching around the block, that's not really fun. But if the students have the chance and the opportunity to maybe go off the path and to follow a trail that they want, that just opens up so many possibilities and makes going outside much more interesting. So here, these 2 pictures are sort of 2 different stories. The first picture on the left, this was during the pandemic when we were stuck at home. I'm lucky enough to live close to some pretty big parks. And we were walking along the paved path, but my daughter never stays on the paved path. So we went off the paved path and ended up in the trees. And we came across these chairs that were like, there was no reason for them to be there. There was a couple of chairs way up in the trees. There was a chair on the ground. And so this, again, stimulated all sorts of different types of conversation. Why was the chair there? What was it doing there? Who put it there? How would you get it down? So because we had that attitude of adventure, we found something unexpected and interesting that we could talk about. This picture on the right is from a friend of mine who teaches, when she was teaching grade 5, she took her students out on a community walk, community adventure, whatever you want to call it. And she said she didn't plan this. It was like it just happened. They came across a puzzle. They actually hadn't found the box yet, but there was puzzle pieces scattered everywhere. And she said, like, she couldn't have planned it better. But her students started to collect all the puzzle pieces. And then when they went back to the classroom, they started to try to put it together. And then their next community adventure, they actually found the box. And so then they knew what the picture was. And so again, she couldn't plan this, but because they had that attitude of adventure, they found something intriguing that really engaged them, and again led to conversation and talking and an excitement to be together out in the community. So that was a really just a cool story of just what happens naturally. I think maybe next year she'll plant it purposely, scatter puzzle pieces around the community. Again, this idea of walking in your community, having an adventure in the community, I think you can do it anywhere, as long as, again, it depends on, sometimes there might be some safety concerns, but in most places, you should be able to go for a walk. And this is a really great resource for that. The best thing about this resource is look how skinny it is. Like you can read this in one sitting. But Jillian Judson, she put together this, it's just called the walking curriculum. And basically what it is really simple ideas for themed walks. And so I put down a couple of examples from the book. But there's examples here for all different age groups. So the idea of a lovely, unlovely walk. And so it's the idea of having something that you're looking for on your walk. So what do you notice on your walk that is lovely or pleasing? What do you find offensive or unappealing? And then that can lead to conversation about why that is. A growth walk. What is growing on your walk? How do you know? That would be a really great one for the spring that's coming up. A border walk. Notice areas of transition on your walk. What are the borders to your walk? A line walk. Find a human line and follow it through the schoolyard, or follow it on wherever it goes. A shape and color walk is a simple one. So you're looking for different shapes. You could be looking for different letter shapes out there as well. What are the different colors you can find on the walk? So really having a purpose for the walk. And so there's really great ideas in here about how do you set up a walk so it's successful? Because quite often when we go outside, students see it as sort of, an unstructured time. They don't necessarily, students don't always see it as a time for learning as well. So setting it up successfully by talking about it really clearly ahead of time on what we're going to do, and sort of what are the expectations when we go out there. So again, this is a great one that kind of gets at that adventure idea when you go outside. I put this picture in sort of that adventure piece or that community idea. What are sort of, how could you contribute to the community where your schools are? This is ice art. So you take a pie plate, you'd find natural materials, you fill it with water and you freeze it, and then you can hang them on trees in your community, and it'll melt eventually and disappear. So it's not like you're leaving something permanent. But how could you contribute in a sort of artistic way? Guerrilla art, guerrilla gardening is another one too. But that's another thing to think about. How can you contribute to the community around you? Students love the idea of maps and paths. And again, that builds on that idea of adventure. They love following maybe tracks that they find in the schoolyard, or they might like finding the secret paths to things as well. So how can you incorporate maps and paths? And a map, again, lots of opportunity for discussion and for drawing and for labeling, all sorts of great literacy and literacy connections and conversation connections with maps. And here's some examples of some maps that students have done. This one, and so it's not always, when we think of a map, we often think of like a road map, but there's different ways to do a map. A map of your community, every time you go out, maybe you record something different. So maybe one time you go out and there was a huge puddle by the entrance of the schoolyard or of the park, and you might come back and put that on your map. Maybe you saw a squirrel one day and you come back and you put that on your map. So a map is a way to record different things that you see outside. And it's a way to connect the indoors and the outdoors. So if you're outside on a walk and you find something, you come back and you record it. And then before you go out the next time, maybe you look at your map and you decide where you want to go, and maybe you want to go back and see if that bird's nest is still there that you saw the other day, or I don't know, that squish squirrel on the road. Who knows what they find outside, but you can use a map to record that. So it doesn't have to look like what we think of as a map. But it's a really great, again, way to visualize the world around you in a different way. And again, making those real world connections. Another very easy way that you can use the outdoors, and again, you don't need a big space. That's why I love the idea of small worlds. So children love small worlds because the world is a huge, massive place. How can we bring it down? How do children bring it down to a scale that they can understand? And so they bring it down to small worlds. And that's why they play with doll houses and train sets and those sorts of things. They're bringing the big world into a smaller space. And it's useful for adults too, or any age group really. I've done this specific activity with all different ages. And so I give the children students a string. I don't know, it could be 2 meters long or whatever. And I ask them to go put the string somewhere, so to make a circle. And within that circle, I give them a challenge like build a playground for an ant. And so they can either gather natural materials around them, or if there's not much around, you might need to bring some things in, but things like sticks and rocks, and usually in most spaces, they can find things to build with. And so it allows them to build with natural materials, but at a scale that's manageable. So they're building, a playground for an ant, or a park for an ant, or maybe whatever you want, really. And so they build it, and then they might play with it. And so again, there might be stories that come out of that. They might tell a story that's happening there, and that's, again, using their language skills and using their imagination. They could write a story about what happened in their park or in their playground. There's also the idea of a micro hike, and a micro hike is along the same idea. Instead of putting the string in a circle, you put it in a line, and you are an ant going on a hike. And so you got to get close to the ground, and you have to look closely. I sometimes give people toothpicks with maybe a little tape off the side as a flag. And so they can mark important places along the trail. So a drop of water might be a lake to an ant, or a rock might be a huge mountain. And so they can take you or their classmates on a guided hike along their little micro trail for an ant. And so there's lots of different ways to think of that small world. And again, there's lots of storytelling and writing and new vocabulary that can come out of this type of experience. Also adding things like clay. Clay doesn't work well in winter, but it works well other times of the year. Clay, you can, again, build with. It's a great thing to add to the small world idea, because you can build little animals, little people. You can use it to stick sticks together. So clay is a great material to add to that small world play. I know fairy homes. Fairy homes are like really popular. You can buy all the things at garden centers and things. But again, that builds on that idea of sort of magic, but also small world, as fairies are supposed to be really small. So sometimes going on a fairy walk, I know there's communities that have fairy walks set up, but maybe setting up your own. We had a group of younger children, and we read a story about fairies, and then we went looking for evidence of fairies. And we didn't have any of this fancy fairy house. Every hole they found was really exciting because they thought a fairy lived in it. So small worlds can have an aspect of sort of magic and fun to them as well. Another connection to the small worlds, again, with literacy and storytelling, is do you have materials that you might engage with indoors? Can you bring them outdoors? So one of the biggest hits at the program I work at is dinosaurs. When we bring out the small plastic dinosaurs, they just, the dinosaurs go on grand adventures, adventures that are not possible inside. And so we built snow volcanoes. So piles of snow, you put a cup in the middle, food coloring, vinegar and baking soda, and you make the volcano. We froze little dinosaurs in little chunks of ice, and then they used hammers to open them. Anyway, different ways to support that sort of storytelling and play outdoors in a different way. And these are balloons that have been frozen with water, and then we take off the balloon and you get round balls of ice. So they're often dinosaur eggs or dragon eggs, and fun to play with outdoors. I had them out this weekend with the group, and they were kicking them around like soccer balls. And one group actually made a little bowling alley out of crazy carpets. They were trying to bowl with them. They're not perfectly round, but it was really cool to see what they did. So Small Worlds is a great way. Another thing that David Sobel talks about is hunting and gathering. And hunting and gathering is sort of how humans evolved. we are deeply connected to that idea of hunting and gathering. It can be skills like fire building and building bow and arrows and those types of things. Or it can be things like a scavenger hunt. A scavenger hunt is that idea of hunting and gathering. We're looking for things outside. And again, scavenger hunts they're sort of a classic outdoor activity. They're a really great way if you're going to a new space to explore the space and get to know the space. You can do a scavenger hunt for colors. So these are paint chip things from Home Depot or Rona or wherever the paint store is. You just get them, they're free, and then you can go look for the colors. So I cut them up, or you can keep them in long strips and you go look for those colors. And so it's a great way, again, to get to know a space, to learn some colors, and to kind of slow down and look more carefully. The bottom left-hand corner is a great example, because paper sometimes works outside, but depending on the conditions, it's not always great. But they took a bed sheet and just cut out a chunk of bed sheet, and they drew different things on it. So shapes and colors and words, and the students were challenged to go find these things in the natural area and bring them back if they could, and add them to this bed sheet. So it was a scavenger hunt that way. And the scavenger hunt on the right is from a resource called 5-Minute Field Trips. And I really like it because it's sort of different than your usual find a plant, find a flower, find a cone. The advanced checklist is just more interesting. So find something that is alive, find something that is dead, find something that has a happy look. So there's scavenger hunts you can do. You can be creative with them. They don't have to be boring. Find something that is changing back to soil. Find a plant that is shaded by a plant that is shaded by a plant. So there's all sorts of creative ways that you could use a scavenger hunt in many different spaces. You could use it on a walk. You could use it if you go to a park. It's a great starting point for getting outside. It's maybe not the easiest thing, but it's sort of one that a lot of people feel comfortable doing. And students know what a scavenger hunt is. They know how to do it. So it's not something new for them to do. All right. What time do we have? It's 8 o'clock. All right. Does anyone have any questions or comments about some of those things I shared? Or have your own that you would like to share? Sylvia said, similar to the rocks, we have explored story jars. You can incorporate natural elements such as moss and twigs in them. Oh, that's cool. Anyone have any questions or comments?
I think for us, for many of our schools, we have the cultural aspects as well. And we have had, we've looked at, and most of our students have never gone home like from the Philippines, and they've never seen the Philippines, right? So we incorporate that, what we see here in Alberta and what we could see like from pictures in the Philippines.
Hmm.
So, we've had an opportunity, I think it was 3 years ago, when we had brought some of our junior high students there. And it basically, because it was so hot, it was better for them to be outdoors because of the breeze than indoors. So they were able to explore that. So I think a lot of us are, heritage schools, is to be able to make those connections between our world here in Canada and the world that they may or may see in their countries, right, of origin. For us, it's just bringing nature pots, and we tell them this is created from clay, but look, we also have similar artifacts here in Canada where they make. So there's similarities, but there's also differences. We say because here in winter they need to make sure that their ceramics are insulated enough, so they put moss in it, right? Here it's more, or sorry, in the native the Philippines, they need to make it cooler, right? So just contrasts.
Yeah, I love that idea. Even with plants and things too, like plants and animals, I could see really going outside and seeing what's here, and then sharing what those pictures or videos or whatever that show what's.
Yeah. When we were doing our planting, we were able to acquire seeds that we could plant here from the native Philippines.
Nice. What would grow in both places?
Well, like when you say bring your plants indoors, a lot of our tropical plants are indoors. Like, I mean, I have one here, it's a tropical plant, but like seeds like morongo, which is a leafy vegetables you put in soup, right? Avocado, you actually can eat the leaves of the avocado. So even as a young avocado tree seedling, I guess, you could still take in, right? So things like that. But then there are also similarities. We also eat carrots. We have potatoes. We may have sweet potatoes, and they grow them here too. So yeah, so things like that. We were able to incorporate a lot of like similarities and differences.
Yeah.
And really, like, our biggest focus was to get the parents involved in teaching their children, because most of it were home based.
Yeah. Nice. Thank you, Grace. That's a great idea. Anyone have any other things they'd like to share? I am going to send you off into some smaller groups because I think that might help encourage some conversation. So I want you to think about all of the ideas I shared, or different ideas, and maybe in the smaller groups, think about and talk about what you might be able to do with your students. So what could you do? What's one thing that you could try in the next month that would take some of the learning outdoors? All right. So what are you gonna do? What's your first step? What are you gonna explore in the next month that you're gonna have to report back on?
Yeah.
We're gonna hold you accountable. Does anyone?
No one's gonna say what it is.
I was gonna do a spreadsheet, but I decided against it.
Well, our elementary students are just coming back to do in person.
Yeah.
They've been online for the longest time. Our high school has been back.
Yeah.
So, and usually in May, we usually go out anyways. But the high school, they are going out to venture out as we bring in our elementary kids, because it's going to be chaotic and noisy. So the teacher thought, well, I'll just take them outside.
That's good.
So, and yeah, and we'll do our walks, I guess,
Yeah.
to name, because we've been building up our vocabulary.
Mhm.
So that's one thing too. We're gonna take our books and, you know, build it where they can find it, kind of like a scavenger hunt.
Yeah. Okay. Monica, what are you gonna do?
I really like the idea of the stone that you paint something.
Oh yeah, the story rocks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes. I think that's really a good idea. And I'm thinking now that finally the stone will melt. I hope very soon. So we can go with them and try to hunt for rocks and then to paint something. And then they have to make up a story.
I mean, rocks we can find them anywhere.
Yes, I think so. I think so. And they like to paint. They like the color to get dirty. I mean,
Yeah.
they like it, but they always want to go wash their hands. But
Yes.
okay, to put
Yeah.
color on rocks. Yeah, I think that's very good.
Nice. I'll send there's a really great woman, Megan Zenny, who she has a little blog on Story Rocks, and I think she puts she just paints maybe that Mod Podge stuff over top after the children make them, just to preserves the paint on it a little better, so you can reuse them. But I'll look that up. Sylvia, you were going to share?
Yeah, so I was talking about how I'm going to get my grade 5ers to go outside and kind of build like a house or some kind of structure, and they have to explain what those words are in Polish, the language they're learning. And I also remembered that it's Earth Day on April 22nd. So yeah, and I know Edmonton Public Library has a lot of like international like resources for different language books for Earth Day, so that's a good resource as well.
Yeah, I totally forgot. That's a good connection. Do something for Earth Day. Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, just having them build something and then explain it using drawing it and labeling it. Even like if once they build something in a 3-dimensional, putting little flags on it, or where they can label it like in situ right there would be a cool idea. Nice, thanks, Sylvia. All right, who's next? Olga? We've got 2 Olgas on here. Maybe she signed in twice. Anyone else have any ideas on how they're going to use this?
I can't say within a month, but I can say that at least in this summer, May, June,
Yes.
probably. I'd like to take one of the classes. We have 6 groups of students of different levels. At least for smaller kids, we want to take them to nearest park and then ask them to write at least 5 words in Telugu, whatever they observe in the park. And then we'll have some small group discussion at the end.
Yeah, I think that's a great start. Yeah, and even giving them the words to find out there as well would be like doing a scavenger hunt. Type idea too would be a great connection as well. Or even drawing it also helps reinforce that word as well. So there's different ways, building it, drawing it, different ways to do it. Olga, you said you're going to do alphabetizing the nearby. That looks like a really interesting way to kind of, again, make it local and make it applicable to what they see in the world around them. All right, so we all have projects to do in the next month. Yeah, so I hope you came away with a few ideas. Again, sometimes I feel my job is just sharing all the ideas, and then you can kind of pick and choose where you want to start. I know Marina has recorded this if you want to listen to it, but I'll also send you the slides, just so that might be faster to go through than listening to the whole recording again. If there's ideas that you missed, or if you want to look at those again, I'll send those out. Also send a couple other links to I have a dressing for the weather resource that might be useful as well. So I'll send a couple links that Marina can share all around. And yeah, so I'll stick around for another couple of minutes if anyone has any other questions, or you want to talk about going outdoors. If not, we will see you next month. maybe in
April
person.
11th.
April 11th in person.
Yeah, are we changing that in case, or so the plan is to maybe ask Christina if she can come so that we could do an in-person, what do you call this, an in-person PD.
Yeah, so we'll see. Yeah, I have to look. That changes my schedule. So
Yeah.
we'll
Well,
have to talk
as
about
of now, it's March 11th, online
April
or
11th.
virtual. And if you haven't signed in yet, we would like you to sign in with your name, your school, and the position you are or you have at your school. Sorry, just so that we can have the official sign in for tonight, if you guys wouldn't mind. And sign in with your name that you would like on your certificate, PD certificate.
And I will put my email in the chat. So if you want to reach out in the next month, I'm also available for that as well. So I'll put that in there. And yeah, I'm interested. I'm curious to see what you do and what it looks like. And I look forward to hearing your success next month. Sylvia, did you have another question or you just have your hand up?
Yeah, I do have another question. I was wondering, that resource you wanted to share with us with the dressing for the weather.
Yes. Yeah.
Is there a possibility of maybe making it so it's in different languages? Like, I don't know, could we talk about that? Maybe that's a possibility.
Yeah, that's cool. So I know someone, one of the teachers at my daughter's school made it in French. But yeah, it's really, I mean, I have all the graphics and stuff, so it could be easily, if anybody wants to translate it. But I'll put the link right now in the chat just so you have it. And then it's just a download off the website. Vivek, thank you for coming. We'll see you next month. Yeah, it'd be great. I'd love to have it translate because I've heard really great reviews of the resource for new Canadians because it's very visual. So to combine it with having it translated, it would be fabulous. All right, well, thank you everyone for your time today. We're ending a little bit early, but I think that's always a good idea. To end to come. And again, I'll stick around for a couple minutes if you have anything else you'd like to share or talk about. Bye.